Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the now deceased Justice on the United States Supreme Court, and her diametrically opposing views as to how court judgments should be arrived at, and also her comments about that the judiciary should remain completely independent of political interference or political pressure, and further that it's essential, vital, a functioning democracy cannot exist without a completely independent judiciary upholding the rule of law. Now, how, you may ask, well, how does Ginsburg, how does she manage to square away this idea that judicial activism is essential to bring social justice? So it's political activism, it's ideological activism that's essential to bring social justice, but at the same time, the court must remain free, or any court she's referring to, but the Supreme Court in this case, any court must remain free of all sorts of political interference or pressure. Now, clearly the two can't exist together. Either you're making judicial decisions based on strictly the facts and the law and the evidence, or you're making decisions based on ideology. Justice Ginsburg was some would say, a very avid supporter of social justice as perceived in the wider Jewish view of the world. And Ruth Ginsburg, or Joan as she originally was, but Ruth Ginsburg was brought up very much in the Jewish faith, going to Jewish summer camp schools, going to Jewish classes, hanging out with Jewish kids, listening to the rabbis talk about the evil Gentiles and so on and so forth. So she's very much schooled in this. Now she's above average intelligence, so that's quite clear. But she's a small, sort of slightly built woman who's got a thing about men and women's role in the world. She's got a thing about the treatment of the Jews. She's got a thing about the evil Gentiles. There's another Hitler about to appear. But all of these things are part of. Now, I would be, if I was picking, jurors and judges, I would be very concerned about picking someone or selecting someone to sit on that had that much activism in their blood, had been brought up in that much activism, had been brought up to view Gentiles with great suspicion. And she was very much part of that Northeast United States activist Jewish sort of set. Now, I've been in the households of these sort of people, and they have whole rooms dedicated to nothing but, any sort of thing, any propaganda, any writings about the Holocaust. They talk about this as if the next Holocaust is imminent. It's only 5 minutes away, and so they have to do something. Now they something to stop it. Now they typically, is a collective, and you definitely, if you're going to Jewish schools, Jewish summer schools, Jewish summer camps, only hanging out, going listening to the rabbi, and so, then you're very much sort of steeped in Jewish mythology and so on, which is fine. But I don't know why you would then want a position of power where you could exercise those mythological fantasies and impose them on the rest of the world or the rest of the population. That doesn't fit with me. And if an activist came in front of me looking for a job like that, then I would say no. Not because she didn't have the intellect to do it, she quite clearly did. Not because she couldn't understand case law, and but because she was an activist, and I would have denied her, or anyone like that, by the way, I would have denied her that job just because she was an activist. Because this is a job where activism has, I don't think, any role. You decide on the facts and the evidence. Now, if we look at the Ginsburg judicial career going back to, I think her first judicial appointment was given to her by Jimmy Carter, I think, way back when. So what that would have been, the 70s, late 70s, or 1970s, I suppose. But she was, and then later, I think Bill Clinton appointed her to the Supreme Court. So she's very much a darling of the globalist, left, and she had very, very strong views on women and feminism, and was given some of the things she said. She was clearly a disciple of the sort of activist Jewish writers around, such as Betty Friedan, who had a very Marxist background, was even an editor for one of the Soviet Union communist newspapers. And so, and you can see the very similar sort of line of thinking and rationale and the way of rationalizing activism and saying, well, it does have a part in the judicial process because it's restorative justice. Not that they were using that term back in the 90s. It's restorative justice. It's compensatory justice, and these sort of things. That if you concentrate on only the facts and the evidence, then you don't take into account, as Ginsburg was theorizing at the time and applying in judicial decisions. Now, if we look at the sort of her writings in terms of judicial findings and dissenting opinions or even majority opinions, the thread of activism was very clear and pronounced. I mean, it's not like it was hidden or something. It was very pronounced, and evidence was interpreted in such a way as you would apply ideological weight to evidence rather than factual weight. So this is my view, of course, and ideologically, the oppressed party was given far more leeway, whereas the oppressor party was given much less leeway. So already I could, in my view at least, I can see the way that the social power concept of justice, which is what we see everywhere today. The Daniel Penny trial recently in New York as an example. Well, he's a straight white guy. He has social power, so we have to hold him to a very high standard. Whereas the other guy, the black guy, the career criminal black guy, we only have to hold him to a much lower standard of evidence. And so anyway, this was part of the Ginsburg shtick, and she cloaked this in some reasonably intellectual sounding sort of presentation, but you can see through that pretty easily. But the point I want to make here is not that she was an activist. I'm not sure any would dispute that. Not that she made, I believe, judicial decisions based on her activism. I mean, if the evidence was utterly 100% overwhelming in one direction, she would go with it. But if there was even the tiniest bit of daylight, and benefit of the doubt could be given to the lesser social power litigant, then she would do it, and constantly she would default, I believe, to that standard of social power, social justice type law. And now, in the various coverage, it's every time a leftist activist judge is appointed to the Supreme Court, it's a matter for euphoric celebration. Every time a constitutional judge that acts on the law and acts on the evidence is appointed, then it's the equivalent of a Nazi tiger. Hitler has taken over the Supreme Court. So the activism, the baked-in level of activism that is seen that you must put an activist judge in, and without activist judges, we can't take control of the place. And we see this with the Biden administration's blatant, brazen appointment of activist judges there's over 200 activist judges that have been. Some of them, if you see the Senate confirmation hearing, some of them don't even have an IQ of 80, I don't think. I mean, the brazen, blatant, unemployable junior law clerks have been given senior judgeships for life, and they're screaming activists. And the Biden administration recently, or the hacks and goons around Biden anyway, recently gave a press release celebrating the fact that the majority of the appointments were women, and they were black and brown women. That this is somehow, why is that good? Why do we give a shit whether it's what gender or race, whatever they are? The issue here is, will you follow and abide by and uphold the law? and the evidence, or do you see your job as a social justice, restorative justice activist role? And clearly these appointments do. So coming back to Ginsburg, she's hailed as this great jurist. I can't see it personally, but was she an activist, and was she into social justice issues? Well, sure. But Ginsburg herself came out with numerous times, not just once, numerous times, saying judicial independence is essential to the functioning of a democracy, and this should be viewed so, and it's vital, and we should all understand. Now, I agree, judicial independence, but judicial independence is also who is appointed to any court, or to any judgeship, or Supreme Court in this case. Clearly, if you're a rabid, Jewish social justice activist, then already you're incapable of the sort of judicial independence that the role requires. Now, if there's a case brought by the ADL or the Jewish League or something, did Ginsburg absent herself from this? No, I can't hear this because I'm a Jewish activist. They're Jewish activists, so I can't participate in this court hearing. Well, no, she didn't. She always stayed on, as far as I can tell, she always stayed on those cases, even though clearly there was clearly a conflict of interest. So whenever you put an activist judge in a court, they're going to often have conflicts of interest, and it must be and should be mandatory that they stand aside from hearing those cases. Rabid feminists hearing cases about, I don't know, rape or something, that sort of stuff, or divorce, apportioning the assets from divorce. Should a rabid feminist hear that? And so on. So this idea of appointing the judges must be appointed with the idea of absolute impartiality, and that is the first process, or first primary step, and a key step, a pivotal step in ensuring that we have an independent judiciary. Now, when we look at legal cases in the United States and elsewhere, but particularly the United States, if you see a strange decision that appears to be made completely on social justice lines, screw the evidence and the facts, then I don't need to even think about it. The judge I know is a Democrat-appointed activist judge. I just know that. If the white guy, who is nowhere near the black or brown person, the white guy obviously is not guilty, but the activist prosecutor's department decide to go after him anyway, then and the guy gets determined as not guilty, then I know it's going to be, assuming that it's not a jury trial, but then I know it's going to be a Republican appointed judge, because they tend to focus on the law and the evidence. But Bader Ginsburg's an interesting case, and one where the interpretation of what independence means varies widely in the eyes of the activist. As far as the activist is concerned, that, well, I've been brought up in a Jewish faith, so it's my job, my role in the world, to make sure I leave the world a better place than I found it. And now to the Jewish activist, that means something very different to what it might mean to a rando Gentile. It doesn't mean the same. To me, leaving the world as a better place would have more completely independent and impartial judges, no activist judges at all. Then I would say, well, I've left the world in a better place, because now there's no activism in judicial circles. It'll only be the facts and the evidence. Or, I've left the world a better place because all the potholes in the road are fixed. Or, I left the world a better place because super wasteful social programs that achieve nothing and bankrupt the nation. I'd see it in a different way. Well, what is a better world? But their idea of a better world is that Gentiles have less power, for example. So the concept of independence is that I can engage in my activism without anybody trying to stop me. And that is what they see as independence, because activism makes the world in their eyes, makes the world a better place, and using the Supreme Court or any judicial position to engage and indulge in this activism. And you see it in Australia as well. people are climate activists that create and spread havoc are arrested, and they get a $50 fine. All the legal fees are paid by NGOs, and so they have no, and they go straight back out onto the street and join another climate protest or riot, and the judge just lets them go. In some cases in Australia, the judges have even congratulated the climate activists on being so stunning and brave. I mean, how did an activist like that not only get appointed to the judiciary, but how do they even get to hear a case like that? Again, it should be mandatory that somebody an activist of that should not be allowed to hear that case. They should voluntarily stand down, say, look, I'm really on board with this climate activism. I can't hear this case. Another judge needs to hear it. But instead, there's now a massive conga line of activists in court administration, in prosecutors' departments, in public defenders, in legal aid, in judicial positions, and they shepherd these climate activists and so on through the system to guarantee that they get and don't get a prison sentence or a fine. And this level of activism now permeates the entire legal establishment. Was set in train at around a little bit earlier, I guess, but the activism of people like Justice Ginsburg came very close to legitimizing activism from the bench, and that has been more than anything a huge tragedy for Western democracy, more than you could possibly imagine. And the height of these people to say at the same time as their rabid activism is spread in all quarters that judicial independence is necessary for a democracy. What they really mean is my activism must be protected. And they see that as an essential component of democracy, when in fact it ensures the destruction of democracy. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.